Oh, blessings. So this is the going to be the fourth chapter of my book, A Different Road from Bum to Mystic. This book basically just covers a few key points in my experience traveling around the country as a bum and then later as more of a mystic and occultist. And what I've done is I've grabbed different experiences and aligned them in such a way to kind of show how I found my home and found my family, like my journey um, towards that, and it's magical. It's pretty magical. So, okay, yeah. So if you like it, if you like what you hear, and check out the other chapters. I've read the first three are in it, but now this is the fourth, and every once in a while I'll read a chapter because it's a powerful story, and I want to get it out there. you know, one way or another. So, and if you know Daniel Radcliffe, will you give him a copy or tell him about it? Because I want him to be I want him to play me. I think it's cool, and I think he might be interested in it. Because I was a half-bearded freak. This is a colorful story. Anyhow, so yeah, here it is. Chapter 4, an iconic death. I got a little quote from the song Ripple from the Grateful Dead. There is a road, no simple highway, between the dawn and the dark of night. And if you go, no one may follow. That path is for your steps alone. It's pretty powerful. I'll have a link too of the song. It's a pretty cool song. You can tell the gathering was ending because trash was everywhere. I did not learn about this until my third gathering when I decided to stay for cleanup. It's disgusting to see how much we impact the environment. And at the same time, it is exciting to see what others leave behind. I've scored sacks of herb, money, tents, sleeping bags, and 100 other cool traveling knickknacks. Of course, I have also buried dead animals, cleaned shit off the trails and the creeks and off the trees, and picked up an untold number of bottles, diapers, and needles. I entered this gathering on the tail end of the first migrators, those who go from one event to another. I connected with a crew of kids traveling on a bus to a commune. That sounded good to me. I had not seen Gigglebug since the beginning of the gathering, so I knew I was on my own. Off we went, 13 of us, 2 dogs and a cat. We were headed to Southern Oregon for a new adventure. This was so awesome. There's nothing like traveling with kids on a bus, bags laid out for beds, joints being passed around, everyone talking at the same time, driver being randomly checked to make sure everything was good. It was bliss in a bus. Bliss with bugs, shall we say. This was my first time being part of a family who never asked me why. They just took me in and saw me as one of their own. No judgments, no expectations, no fears. The journey took 2 days because we had to stop in Wairika to pick up supplies and panhandle for gas. I already experienced panhandling on the streets of Santa Barbara, but this experience was completely different. I was in a place I had never been before, and my needs were looming rather than casual. In Santa Barbara, panhandling was a thing to pass the time, something I did to get money for cigarettes or acid. Now I was panhandling because that was the only source of money I had. We had to get gas for the bus and food for our bellies. Not to mention, most of us smoked cigarettes. By the time we reached the community, we were ready to shower and rest. The only problem was that the person who invited us to the community did not have the right to do so. We were unwelcome guests, and to top it off, we were out of gas and a few of us had lice. A few days later, one of the kids and I hitched into town to get food and money. We made $30 and got enough food for 2 days. On our way back, we came across a newspaper stand with the headlines of Jerry Garcia's death. I had only been to a few shows, but my companion had been a deadhead for years. It was a shock, to say the least. The paper said there was going to be a memorial on the 13th down in San Francisco. We hitched back to the community to share the news and go. We arrived on the 12th of August. Hippies were everywhere. We heard there was going to be a 3-day memorial at the polo fields, so we parked the bus as close as we could and slept. The next day we found out it was only going to be a 1-day event. I remember how disappointed everyone was. The memorial was free, though. By the time we got to polo fields, most of us had veered from the group. I'd taken my shirt off and written "Dose me no mercy" on my chest. It was really a stupid idea. It was crazy. People were everywhere, some crying, others just staring into oblivion like the world had crashed down on them. Some meandered through the crowds or sat together quietly talking among themselves. As I made my way to the front, random people stopped and offered me blotter, a few drops of liquid, or a pinprick of crystal LSD. By the time people started to talk on stage, I was in another world. My memory stops at this point. I can only assume people kept feeding me acid as I stumbled by. My next memory came while I sat in a doorway on Haight Street, and this guy named Pigpen, who told me he had contracted Giardia at the gathering, otherwise known as the Rainbow Squirts. I must have been totally fucked up because as I looked at his shoes and saw shit running down his leg, I thought it was perfectly normal. The next time I remember anything was a few days later as I sat on the corner of Haight and Ashbury begging for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. I remember at one point sitting by the memorial of burning candles, gifts, and images of Garcia and looking around to see the streets filled with hippies. Some sitting against walls, smoking herb, others slinging drugs like there was no worry in the world of 5-0, and still others hanging out by their cars. This must have been what it was like in the 60s. The police kept their distance for a week, allowing us kids for the most part to rule the streets. About a week later, the cops started to have a presence. This made sitting against the wall a lot harder. People began to disperse, some to the next rainbow gathering, others to some show or another. As for myself, I wanted to go back home. It felt really good to return. It's only been a few months, but it felt like years. I was coming home as a whole new person. When we travel, the world is fluid, dynamic, and perpetually in motion. The world moves quickly. One moment we can be dead broke and starving, and the next moment we can be sitting in a mansion sipping cocktails. As I walked down State Street, I noticed everything was just as I had left it. The same coffee shops, the same people, and the same conversations, only now Santa Barbara no longer possessed me, held me down, or prevented me from leaving. Instead, she became my nurturing mother. Santa Barbara became my healing ground. She nursed me back to health whenever I needed it. Her shadows offered me a resting place. Her beaches became my bed, and her drum circle became my heartbeat. I was home. The only high point during my stay this time around occurred a few days after I got back. A group of friends and I acquired some LSD and headed out to Lizard's Mouth. Lizard's Mouth is a cool place out in the hills with a rock formation that looks like a lizard from a distance. We go out there because it's a safe place to trip without the stress of cops. At one point during the night, I talked to a friend about the road and how much fun it was. She was 14, her parents were dead, and she was stuck living with an aunt she did not like. She absorbed every word I spoke. I didn't know it then, but after I left town, she had hooked up with some kids and left herself. The road is magical. It's romantic, scary, and filled with amazing synchronicities. I cannot remember how many times I wanted something to happen or to see someone, and within a few days it would happen. It sounds unbelievable, but it is absolutely true. Life is magical, and when things are moving, things happen. It was September 1st, 1995, when I heard about the hog farm. I wanted to go. I needed to go. I packed my things and headed out that very night. The festival was opening the next day, so I decided to hitch into the night. This was to be my first of 3 key lessons regarding night hitchhiking. The second time I hitched at night, I got a ride with some guy transporting a crap load of meth from New Mexico to California. And the third time I got a ride at night was from for my drunk guy driving down to Key West on Christmas Eve. He was so drunk that we kept swerving into the opposite lane the whole way there. That would be my last time hitching a ride in the dark. This time, though, I was in Salinas. It was dark and I was chanting a Blackfoot gambling song I learned at the gathering. Supposedly, if this song is sung in cycles of 4, the odds of something happening will improve for the singing. The only problem was I forgot how many times I had sung the song. 30 minutes later, I was picked up by a guy in a pickup truck. He said he would take me halfway, which sounded good to me, even though there was something odd about him. At this time in my traveling career, I had not learned to trust my instincts. The drive was long and there was very little conversation, so I nodded off. I woke because it was quiet. The lights were off, we were parked somewhere, and the driver looked at me with eyes of hunger. "What's going on?" I asked. "You're going to have to do me a favor before we start driving again," he responded. Unconsciously, I reached down to my side and the motion caught his eyes. "What you got there?" he asked. "A knife," I responded. It caught him off guard for a second, just long enough for me to open the door and run out. I ran down the road as fast as I could. I was so scared. My frantic running was interrupted by the sound of screeching tires and a speeding truck coming hell-bent towards me. I took off up a hill and ran until I fell down exhausted. After what felt like an hour, I finally made my way back down to the road, which now was completely dead. I sat down, freaked out. 10 minutes later, I stood up and started walking. That fucker had my stuff. I came to a turnoff with an outhouse. I went inside, put the seat down, locked the door, and tried to sleep. The next morning, I was awoken by the sound of cars. I opened the door to see a guy sitting in an RV staring at a map. I asked him where I was. He told me I was on Highway 1. This sucks, I thought. The only way I knew how to get to the hog farm was on Highway 101. I had to hitch back 20-something miles to reconnect with it. It did not take long to get the rides I needed, and by noon or a little after, I was in Laytonville. I was here. Sticking out my thumb, I felt so good. I had nothing but my feeling of relief in the clothes on my back. My next ride was to the hog farm parking lot. I told the driver my crazy story. After listening to my story, the driver offered me his extra ticket. He originally intended to sell it, but my pathetic story inspired him to give it away instead. This is the synchronicity I was talking about earlier. If I had not gotten the crazy-ass driver, if for some reason I had sung the gambling song differently, if I had chosen to wait, or if I had gone a different way, the odds of me getting the free ticket would have been slim. As it was, I had exactly what I was hoping for, minus the sleeping bag, of course. It was so awesome to be standing there in the parking lot, ticket in hand, looking out at all the colorful people. Life is good. I half ran, half skipped to the entrance, exchanged my ticket for a bracelet, and off I went down the rabbit hole. Talk about entering into a new world. It was beautiful. People were all around, music blaring. One kid held up a foot-long nugget inviting people to buy it. Things could not get better than this, but of course they did. A few of the brothers and sisters I met in Shasta were here, and one of them had a sleeping bag I could use during the festival. I ended up hanging out with them throughout the day and night. At one point during the day, the Merry Pranksters went inside their bus. I thought it would be cool to walk up and bang on their window. Timothy Leary pulled down the window. "What is the meaning of life?" I asked him. Larry responded in his typical humorous way. Up and down, he told me, before looking deeply into my eyes with all the seriousness of the world as he continued. "Keep it up, kid." For a trip and a half bearded kid, I felt as if God's finger had touched me. The next day had even more surprises. That girl from Santa Barbara I talked about the road had made an appearance. We talked throughout the day and made plans to hang out later that night. As evening arrived, I learned how to work the dealers by finding them customers. By doing this, everyone gave me a cut of their goods. By nightfall, I had acquired 10 hits of Leary acid. It was some of the strongest acid I've ever had. My friend from Santa Barbara wanted a few hits, so I gave her 3. I did not think about it then, but I should have. Not, I should not have given them to her. A couple of hours later, I was tripping my ass off when she comes running down the trail, screaming her head off, stark naked. I was freaked out. After failing to calm her down, some elders popped up and took her to the chill bus. I hid in my borrowed sleeping bag for the rest of the night. In the morning, she asked me what happened. I told her it would be better if she did not know. The festival was closing, and she was headed north with her traveling companions. I told her how proud I was for her leaving, and I apologized for not being there for her the night before. I wished her blessed travels, gave her a hug, and took off before my shame overwhelmed me. As I walked to the exit, I had a crazy idea to get some stuff. I got a piece of cardboard, a marker, and wrote on it my needs for a sleeping bag and other supplies. Within 5 minutes, I had a sleeping bag, backpack, and a ride going south. This would be one of the last times I felt the love of family on the road. Earlier, I wrote about the deteriorating aspects of the road. Part of this decline comes from the fear and selfishness brothers and sisters started to surround themselves with. If you needed anything, there would have always been someone there to help you. At the first Grateful Dead show I went to, way before I was a traveler, I remember a sister walking around asking for shoes for another brother who had none. On the road years later, I was at a fish show, I was at a fish lot, watching as a sister wet her buds to make them weigh more. As she laughed with her swinger buddies, her nicely manicured dreads bobbing her head like Medusa snakes. I was petrified. While she did this, a hobbled kid walked by looking for some shoes, and not one of them turned around to help. They were so caught up in their own little world that they failed to notice the suffering before them. This would never have happened before. I was so sick to my stomach. I didn't have money, but I helped them. For sharing makes the world a better place. And it does. Oh, blessings.